July 10th, 1945, Mar del Plata, Argentina. 2 months after Germany's surrender, a German U-boat surfaces off the Argentine coast. Local authorities are stunned. The war ended in May. Why is a Nazi submarine appearing now, thousands of miles from Germany? The submarine is U-530. When Argentine officials board her, they find a crew of young men, most barely 20 years old, with no identification papers. The ship's logbook is missing. The deck gun has been thrown overboard. The crew refuses to explain where they've been for the past 4 months or what they were doing. 5 weeks later, on August 17th, another German U-boat, U-977, surfaces at the same location. This submarine's commander claims they spent 66 consecutive days underwater, setting what will be the second longest submerged voyage in submarine history. The appearance of these two U-boats sparked conspiracy theories that persist to this day. Were they transporting Nazi gold to South America? Did they help Adolf Hitler escape to Argentina? Did they make secret voyages to Antarctica? Were they involved in sinking a Brazilian warship? For nearly 80 years, these questions have haunted historians. The truth, documented but often ignored, is somehow both more mundane and more fascinating than the legends. Today we're exploring the real story of the last two Nazi U-boats to surrender and the mysteries that still surround them. U-530 was a Type 9 C/40 submarine, one of Germany's long-range U-boats capable of reaching distant waters. At 252 feet long with 6 torpedo tubes carrying 22 torpedoes, she was a formidable warship. Commissioned in October 1942, U-530 completed 7 war patrols, sinking 2 Allied ships and damaging another. Her final patrol began on March the 3rd, 1945, when she departed Horten, Norway, with orders to operate off the coast of New York. Her commander was 25-year-old Oberleutnant zur See Otto Wermuth, commanding his first patrol. U-530 successfully crossed the Atlantic and operated as close as 2 to 3 miles off Long Island, extraordinarily dangerous territory with heavy Allied patrols. On May 4th, 1945, U-530 sighted a convoy and attacked with 3 torpedoes. 2 missed. The third suffered a battery explosion and never left the tube. 2 days later, they attacked another convoy with 5 torpedoes. All missed. On May 7th, they fired 2 more torpedoes at a third convoy. Again, all missed. Then came May 8th, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. Admiral Karl Dönitz, who had become Germany's leader after Hitler's suicide, radioed all U-boats with explicit orders: surrender at the nearest Allied port immediately. U-530 was approximately 1,000 miles east-northeast of Puerto Rico when the surrender order arrived. Young Commander Wermuth faced a decision: obey orders and surrender to the Allies, or... Wermuth later claimed he thought the surrender order was an Allied trick, enemy propaganda designed to lure U-boats into traps. But this explanation doesn't hold up. But by May 8th, Germany's defeat was undeniable. Radio broadcasts confirmed it. The war was clearly over. So Wermuth made a fateful choice. He would sail to Argentina. Why Argentina? The country had a large German population. Many fleeing Nazis had found refuge there. Argentina had remained neutral until March 27th, 1945, less than 2 months earlier, when it finally declared war on Germany. Wermuth apparently thought he and his crew would receive better treatment there than from the Allies, but first he had to destroy evidence. The crew dumped their 5 remaining torpedoes overboard. They jettisoned all anti-aircraft ammunition. They threw the ship's logbook into the ocean. They removed the deck gun and sank it, and they burned all identification papers. When U-530 finally surrendered, not one crew member carried documents proving who they were. The journey from the Caribbean to Argentina should have taken 6 to 8 weeks maximum. U-530 took over 2 months, arriving on July 10th, 1945. What were they doing during that extra month? Nobody knows. The crew refused to explain. The logbook was gone. Commander Wermuth provided no details. When U-530 surfaced off Mar del Plata, Argentine authorities initially celebrated. Then suspicion set in. Kyoru, why the delay? Where's the logbook? Why destroy identification? What were you really carrying? The mysterious arrival of U-530 created an international sensation and spawned conspiracy theories that exploded across South America and eventually the world. Theory 1. Hitler escape. The most sensational theory claimed U-530 had transported Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun to Argentina. According to this theory, Hitler hadn't died in his Berlin bunker on April 30th, 1945. Instead, he had escaped via U-530, which secretly stopped along the Argentine coast before surrendering. The FBI documented claims from a self-proclaimed Argentine refugee who said he'd met Hitler after his arrival via U-boat at Valdez Peninsula in May 1945. An Anglo-American commission in Argentina accused U-530's crew of helping Hitler escape. The timeline doesn't work. Hitler died April 30th. U-530 was 1,000 miles off Puerto Rico on May 8th. There's no plausible scenario where U-530 could have picked up Hitler from Germany, yet the theory persisted and still does. Theory 2. Nazi gold. Another theory claimed U-530 carried looted Nazi gold to establish a Fourth Reich financial base in South America. The missing logbook and destroyed evidence seemed to support this, but U-530 was operating off New York in early May, thousands of miles from any Nazi gold deposits in Europe. How could it have picked up treasure? Theory 3. The Brazilian cruiser. On July 4th, 1945, just 6 days before U-530 surrendered, the Brazilian cruiser Bahia exploded and sank, killing over 300 sailors. Brazilian admirals immediately suspected U-530 had torpedoed the ship. The Argentine Ministry of the Navy investigated and cleared U-530. Further investigation revealed the truth. Bahia had sunk due to a gunnery accident during drills. An internal explosion, not a torpedo, but U-530 got blamed anyway. 5 weeks after U-530's arrival came an even more mysterious submarine, U-977. U-977 was a Type 6 Sea U-boat, smaller than U-530, displacing only 769 tons with 5 torpedo tubes and 14 torpedoes. She had been commissioned in July 1942, but spent her first 2 years in training. She never completed a single combat patrol. On May 2, 1945, 6 days before Germany surrendered, U-977 departed Kristiansand, Norway, commanded by 24-year-old Oberleutnant Zorze Heinz Schaeffer. His orders: enter the British port of Southampton and sink Allied shipping. It would have been a suicide mission. Southampton was heavily defended. A Type 7 submarine stood virtually no chance. When Admiral Donitz ordered all U-boats to stand down on May 5th, U-977 was outbound north of Scotland. Schaeffer faced the same choice as Wermuth: surrender or run. Schaeffer later explained his decision in a 1952 book titled U-Boat 977. He had heard Joseph Goebbels' propaganda broadcast claiming the Allies' Morgenthau plan would turn Germany into a goat pasture, and that all German men would be enslaved and sterilized. Terrified by this propaganda, Schaeffer decided to flee to Argentina rather than surrender, but first he gave his crew a choice. On May 10, 1945, U-977 stopped near Holsøy, Norway. Schaeffer told his men, those who wanted to surrender could go ashore. Those willing to risk the journey to Argentina could stay aboard. 16 men, mostly married crew members with families, chose to leave. They rowed ashore in a dinghy and eventually ended up in British hands. The remaining crew, most barely out of their teens, sailed south. What happened next became one of submarine history's most debated voyages. According to Captain Schaeffer's account, U-977 made a continuous submerged schnorchel voyage from May 10th to July 14th, 1945 to 66 consecutive days underwater, the second longest submerged voyage in submarine history, after U-978's 68 days. The schnorchel, or snorkel, was a retractable breathing tube that allowed submarines to run diesel engines while remaining just below the surface. This enabled longer underwater periods, but was far from comfortable. Schaeffer described conditions aboard during those 66 days as hellish. Temperatures inside the submarine reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius. Humidity approached 100%, making everything constantly damp. The air was thick with diesel fumes, causing headaches and nausea. Men developed painful skin rashes from constant moisture. Many crew members were on the verge of nervous breakdown. Some begged to surface and surrender, but Schaeffer pushed on. By his account, U-977 didn't surface until July 14th, near the Cape Verde Islands, where they stopped briefly. the crew swimming in the ocean for the first time in over 2 months. After the swim break, they continued south on the surface using one diesel engine. On July 23rd, they crossed the equator. On August 17th, after 108 days at sea, U-977 arrived at Mar del Plata and surrendered. But there's a problem with Schaeffer's account. The U.S. Navy interrogated U-977's crew immediately after surrender and issued a report on September 19, 1945. That report makes no mention of a 66-day submerged voyage. Instead, the Navy report states that U-977 made for the Iceland Passage on course 300 degrees northwest by west, diving once on sighting a plane and once on sighting a ship. She was also DF'd, direction found many times late in May. The report says U-977 stopped at Cape Verde, then completed the trip traveling on the surface using one engine. So, which account is true? Did U-977 spend 66 days submerged, or did Schaeffer exaggerate the story in his 1952 book to make the voyage sound more dramatic? Submarine historians remain divided. Some note that crew testimony during interrogation does support elements of an extended submerged voyage. Others point out that translation errors and poor interrogation techniques might have caused confusion in the Navy report. What's undeniable, U-977 spent 108 days at sea, an extraordinarily long patrol for a Type 7 U-boat. When both U-530 and U-977 surrendered, Argentina promptly turned them over to the United States. The submarines and crews were transported to the U.S., where intense interrogations began. American intelligence officers had the same questions everyone else had. Why Argentina instead of the nearest Allied port? What took so long? Where are the logbooks? Did you transport anyone or anything? Did you sink the Brazilian cruiser Bahia? Were you involved in helping Nazi leaders escape? Both commanders, Wermuth and Schaeffer, maintained their innocence. They provided similar explanations. They feared harsh treatment from the Allies. They thought Argentina would be more lenient. They destroyed logbooks and identification to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. If they were sunk en route, they transported no one except their own crews. They sank no ships after Germany's surrender. The Argentine investigation had already cleared both submarines of sinking Bahia. The timing and locations didn't match. Bahia sank from an internal accident, not a torpedo. Heinz Schaeffer and Otto Wermuth first met in mid-1945 when introduced by U.S. authorities. They had never coordinated their journeys. Their similar decisions to flee to Argentina were independent. After months of interrogation, U.S. authorities concluded both submarines had acted on their own initiative, motivated by fear of Allied retribution. There was no evidence of Hitler escape, Nazi gold transport, or Antarctic voyages. U-530 was sunk by torpedo from USS Toro on November 28, 1947 during target practice. U-977 was sunk during naval firing exercises in 1946. Heinz Schaeffer was released in 1947. He published his memoir U-Boat 977 in 1952 and died in 1979. Otto Wermuth faded into obscurity, but the conspiracy theories never died. Despite clear evidence debunking the conspiracy theories, they persist in popular culture to this day. Why? First, the mysteries are real. The missing logbooks, the destroyed evidence, the unexplained delays, the secrecy, these aren't inventions. They're documented facts that cry out for explanation. Second, the official explanations seem insufficient. We were afraid of the Allies doesn't fully explain why two independent U-boat commanders made identical decisions to flee to Argentina. Why not Spain? Why not Japan? Why specifically Argentina? Third, the timing is suspicious. U-530 took 2 months longer than necessary. During that missing time, theoretically, they could have done anything. Fourth, post-war Argentina de-eyed harbor Nazis. Thousands of Nazi war criminals fled to Argentina, including Adolf Eichmann and Josef Mengele. If those monsters reached South America, why not others via U-boat? Fifth, the Antarctic theories. Some conspiracies claim U-530 U-530 and / or U-977 made secret voyages to Antarctica, where Nazi Germany had supposedly established a secret base. While there's zero credible evidence for Nazi Antarctic bases, the theory's persistence shows how these submarines became vessels, pun intended, for every Nazi escape fantasy. Sixth, we want mysteries. The mundane truth, two young commanders making panicked decisions based on propaganda, is less exciting than Hitler escaping or Nazi gold being smuggled. The reality is that U-530 and U-977 were the last gasps of a dying regime. Young men, barely adults, terrified by propaganda about Allied retribution, making desperate choices that seemed rational at the time but led nowhere. They weren't heroes, they weren't masterminds. They were scared kids in submarines who didn't want to face the consequences of their nation's defeat. The last two Nazi U-boats to surrender, U-530 on July 10, 1945, and U-977 on August 17, 1945, represent the final chapter of Germany's U-boat war. Out of nearly 1,200 U-boats built during World War II, these were among the last to give up. Most U-boats had surrendered in May 1945 as ordered. A handful, like U-234, which surrendered to the U.S. on May 14th carrying uranium, tried clever schemes, but U-530 and U-977 went the farthest, literally and figuratively. Their journeys to Argentina weren't acts of heroism. They were acts of desperation by young men who believed enemy propaganda and chose flight over responsibility. The conspiracy theories that surrounded them, Hitler escape, Nazi gold, Antarctic bases, say more about our collective fascination with Nazi mysteries than about what these submarines actually did. The documented truth is compelling enough without embellishment. 2. U-boat commanders independently decided to flee thousands of miles to Argentina, destroying evidence along the way, arriving months after their nation's surrender, and triggering international incidents that required investigations by multiple governments. Today, both submarines rest on the ocean floor where they were deliberately sunk as target practice. Inglorious ends for vessels that sparked so many dramatic theories. Heinz Schaeffer's 1952 memoir U-Boat 977 remains the most detailed account of these final voyages, though historians debate how much he exaggerated for dramatic effect. The last two Nazi U-boats to surrender remind us that history's final chapters are often messy, confusing, and far less dramatic than legends suggest. But they also remind us that even in history's twilight moments, individuals make choices, sometimes brave, sometimes cowardly, sometimes simply confused, that echo through decades. Thank you for watching this exploration of the last Nazi U-boats to surrender. If you found this fascinating, please subscribe for more World War II mysteries and let me know in the comments. Do you believe the conspiracy theories or do you accept the documented explanations? Until next time, remember, sometimes the truth is less exciting than the legend, but it's still worth knowing.